Something is shifting in global politics, and Washington is not at the center of it. The United Kingdom has crossed a quiet but consequential line. British Prime Minister Keir Starmer has landed in Beijing, becoming the first British leader in 8 years to meet China's president in what he himself called a historic visit. A reset, a thaw, an attempt to end what Starmer bluntly described as the UK-China Ice Age. This is the same Prime Minister who once labelled Beijing a national security threat. The same government whose intelligence services accused China of espionage, and yet there he was, seated across from Xi Jinping, calling China a vital player on the global stage. The message was unmistakable. Britain is recalibrating. Behind the scenes, the timing matters. UK-US relations, once ironclad, are under strain. President Donald Trump has openly clashed with European allies. Even London, Washington's closest partner, is feeling the chill. And Britain is not alone. Another major US ally, Canada, has also begun re-engaging Beijing, signaling that the West's unity on China is no longer guaranteed. Now the UK is following suit, not with applause, not with declarations of friendship, but with cold-eyed pragmatism. Starmer's message before boarding the plane was blunt: Britain cannot afford to stick its head in the sand. Golden Age, Ice Age, now something in between. A relationship that pursues business, trade, and strategic dialogue while managing, not resolving, deep disagreements. China, for its part, welcomed the shift. President Xi acknowledged the twists and turns that poisoned relations and framed cooperation as imperative in a turbulent world. Visa agreements, professional qualifications, economic engagement, no grand breakthroughs, but no cold shoulder either. And noticeably absent from the cameras, human rights, promised before the trip, missing from the moment. At home, critics accuse Starmer of appeasement. In Washington, observers warn this outreach could provoke Trump's anger, especially as he casts China as America's primary rival. But Britain appears to have made its calculation. In a world of fractured alliances, economic pressure, and geopolitical uncertainty, London is choosing flexibility over loyalty. This isn't about choosing Beijing over Washington, it's about survival in a multipolar world where even the closest allies hedge their bets. The ice is cracking, the old order is shifting, and Britain has decided it cannot afford to freeze. The question now is not whether the UK is thawing ties with China, it's how far it's willing to go and what it's willing to risk as the balance of power continues to tilt.
Yes, we had a very good, productive session with real concrete outcomes, and it was a real strengthening of the relationship, and that's in the national interest because, of course, there are huge opportunities here in China. It's the second biggest economy in the world, and that's why we've got such a big business delegation. A lot of the discussion was about how we open up access for those opportunities, focusing, as I always do, on how is this going to be delivered back in the United Kingdom, how does it benefit people back at home. And we made some really good progress on tariffs for whiskey, on visa-free travel to China, and on information exchange and cooperation on irregular migration, focusing particularly on small boats and engine parts. So a very good constructive meeting with real outcomes, and that's very much in our national interest. Well, we've agreed that on tariffs for whiskey, we're looking at how they're to be reduced, what the time frame is, visa-free travel, how far, how much, and when that can start, and on the information exchange on small boats, the cooperation that we need within a dialogue actually about greater strategic focus on security and defence. But for us it's very important on small boats that we get our arms around the engines that are being used in those small boats. So on all those three areas, but they're examples of a much wider opening of access for business that we discussed at great length in terms of the fact that after 8 years, this is the first visit by our Prime Minister, and we wanted to make sure that we've got that strategic approach on all of these issues. Well, we did have a good meeting, and a long meeting as well. We had the formal parts, we had some informal parts, and then we continued over lunch. And so the relationship is in a good place, a strong place. And what I'd say to everybody here is that I always act in our national interest. And therefore the question for me is, how does this accelerate and deliver back at home? I know that whatever's going on in the world, the most important thing to the vast majority of people is the cost of living. So opening up access to business, opportunities, seizing those opportunities, which then gets reflected in better businesses, in jobs, in price reductions at home, really, really matter. And so we made real progress on all of those areas.
Donald Trump is issuing a stark warning to Canada. Don't move closer to China. As Ottawa courts Beijing, Trump threatens a crushing response: 100% tariffs. The message is blunt: pick a side, Washington or Beijing. Trump is targeting Canada's China trade push, turning tariffs into weapons and trade into a battlefield. Trump accused Canada of trying to turn itself into what he called a drop-off port for Chinese goods entering the U.S. market, warning that such a move would be met with immediate punishment. He claimed China would, quote, eat Canada alive, destroying its businesses, social fabric, and way of life if closer ties were pursued. The warning follows an earlier attack by Trump, accusing Canada of opposing his proposed Golden Dome missile defense system over Greenland, a project Trump claims would also protect Canadian territory. Trump criticized Ottawa for resisting the defense plan, while at the same time choosing to expand economic engagement with China. Trump's remarks came shortly after Prime Minister Mark Carney's visit to Beijing, where he sought to revive trade ties with China, Canada's second-largest trading partner after the United States. During the visit, Canada and China agreed to reduce tariffs on select Canadian agricultural exports and introduce quotas on Chinese electric vehicles entering the Canadian market. The understanding could also open the door to increased Chinese investment in Canada. Carney's visit marked the first visit by a Canadian leader to China in nearly a decade, with discussions framed by both sides as part of a changing global economic order. Chinese President Xi Jinping welcomed what he described as a turnaround in bilateral relations. Speaking earlier about the deal, Carney appeared to reference tensions with Washington, calling Canada's recent engagement with China more predictable and describing talks with Beijing as realistic and respectful. Carney had also sharply criticized the United States and Western allies during his address at the World Economic Forum in Davos.
It seems that every day we're reminded that we live in an era of great power rivalry, that the rules-based order is fading, that the strong can do what they can and the weak must suffer what they must. And this aphorism of Thucydides is presented as inevitable, as the natural logic of international relations reasserting itself. And faced with this logic, there is a strong tendency for countries to go along to get along, to accommodate, to avoid trouble, to hope that compliance will buy safety. Well, it won't. Let me be direct. We are in the midst of a rupture, not a transition. Over the past 2 decades, a series of crises in finance, health, energy, and geopolitics have laid bare the risks of extreme global integration. But more recently, great powers have begun using economic integration as weapons. tariffs as leverage, financial infrastructure as coercion, supply chains as vulnerabilities to be exploited.